if I can get on my soapbox for a second.
Yeah.
Especially, we talked about people are going to have strong views on fraternities right off the bat.
Yeah.
And I think I like to read other reviews just to kind of see, hey, am I seeing everything that everybody else is seeing and all that stuff? There's quite a few that I think completely missed your point, which is you don't in this book go on a diatribe on frats are bad. This is awful. We should abolish them. But I think an anecdote like that you put in there, I think you're kind of saying like, hey, if you thought this was all cool, just remember that, this kind of stuff is happening out there where this person was selling drugs and now they're doing this. I felt like I kind of got what you were doing the whole time, which is you're not going to condemn anyone one way or the other. But the choices that you make in the book, I think, kind of tell you a lot about Greek life.
Definitely. And I think, setting out to write the book, I was like, I don't need to tell people that waterboarding an 18-year-old is bad. And I don't need to tell people that running a multi-million-dollar drug network that ends with a murder and so many overdose deaths and all this destruction, and then ultimately ends with the police sort of covering so much of it up and allowing basically everyone to get away with it. I don't need to tell people how to feel about that. I feel like, to me, my job is to basically show how this links to American power, to show the inside of a very closed bubble of wealth and power that most people don't get to get inside, and make connections with kind of the world we live in. But ultimately, I'm just not and there are writers like this, and some people do it well, but I'm not the kind of writer who's like, here comes the message, choo-choo, like open wide, and then, here's how you need to feel about this. That's a creative choice. But I think anyone who reads that book thinking that my takeaway is just that these guys are awesome, I guess that reading is open to someone. I do feel strongly, I'm not going to tell someone how to read the book, but it's very different than how I read it when I reread it. I'll say that.
I think there's always going to be a section of people. I was discussing this with producer Mike right before.
Yeah.
And just some people watch Wolf of Wall Street and think, that's the coolest thing ever, man. And it's like Goodfellas.
Yeah.
If you watch Goodfellas and you get to the end and you're like, oh, I'd love to be a gangster. It's like, I'm not sure you got the point of that, but okay.
Well, first of all, it's funny because these guys loved the movie Wolf of Wall Street. They printed out shirts that called themselves the Wolves of King Street, with photos of Leo on them, and handed them out. I talked to multiple guys in the drug ring who called themselves like the Wolves of King Street in different fraternities. They all love The Wire. A lot of them love Goodfellas. They all love Scarface. And even though each of these movies ends with like a violent downfall, they all just remember the first act as being awesome. And there's that very pretentious, Truffaut French art house quote, there's no such thing as an anti-war movie. Because the same thing, people do the same thing with Apocalypse Now. Like my dad said in the 80s, the broiest guys he knew would be like, I love the smell of napalm in the morning. Totally unironically, because they just thought that was a cool quote. And I was aware when I wrote this book that there are going to be people who read Mikey's story and who read the College of Charleston drug ring story and think the same thing, who think like, oh, this is just awesome. But my job is I'm not giving a sermon, I'm telling a story, and I think the story has a message, but like a good story is told and not sort of like spoon-fed. And so similar to the creative choice Scorsese made with Goodfellas, at some point you just have to tell a story. Goodfellas would be a much worse movie if at the end Martin Scorsese stepped in front of the camera and said like, hello audience, I know the story you just watched is exciting and full of many a twist and turn, but I just want you to know that
don't try this at home.
Yeah, Henry Hill is bad. And it's like, yeah, like that's not art. That's like a children's story.